Billionaire lost his fortune overnight, until the janitor said, "Sir, you forgot this one paper." Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The Grand Office Tower stood tall in the heart of downtown, a beacon of power and wealth. For weeks, everything seemed to go perfectly for Michael Harris. At 35, he was the youngest CEO in the company's history, overseeing billions in assets and managing a team of the brightest minds in the business. His days were filled with meetings, handshakes, and high-end restaurants, each one more luxurious than the last. But on this particular day, things were different. Today, the company's investment portfolio had taken a massive hit, and within a span of just a few hours, Michael found himself without the empire he'd spent years building. The numbers on his phone screen kept flashing in front of him, each one a reminder of his dwindling fortune. He had lost everything: his office, his status, and his wealth. He was left with only a fraction of what he once had, and it didn't take long for his friends and colleagues to distance themselves. Walking out of the building for the last time, Michael's mind was swirling with panic and disbelief. The weight of his failure pressed down on him, and as he passed the familiar faces of the city, he felt the isolation creep in. The world that once felt like his domain now seemed distant and cold. He had nothing left but the cold streets beneath his feet. As Michael walked aimlessly, he found himself passing by an old office building, one that had always seemed out of place in the hustle of modern skyscrapers. The windows were old, the exterior was chipped, and there was a faint smell of dust in the air. He paused for a moment, almost instinctively, as though something in the quiet building called to him. That's when he saw the janitor, an older man, hunched over a cart, methodically sweeping the floor. The janitor looked up briefly, his eyes meeting Michael's. Without a word, the janitor resumed his task, his movements slow but purposeful. Michael stood frozen for a moment, his mind lost in thought. It was then that the janitor stopped, looking up at him with a gentle smile. "Sir," the janitor said, his voice kind but firm, "you forgot this one paper." The janitor handed over a single sheet of paper, folded neatly in half. Michael stared at it for a moment, confusion crossing his face. He hadn't noticed he'd dropped it. He took the paper, still trying to comprehend the situation. Why was he even here? What was happening to his life? In that instant, Michael realized that sometimes the smallest moments could hold the greatest significance. This janitor, a man who probably had no idea what Michael was going through, had just given him a simple piece of paper, but it wasn't just any paper. It was the very document he needed to begin the process of rebuilding his life. The paper contained the key to an untapped investment opportunity, an opportunity he had nearly missed in his panic. The janitor, unaware of the role he had just played in changing Michael's future, simply nodded and turned to continue his work. Michael stood there for a moment, the weight of the encounter settling in. His world had just shifted in a way he could never have expected. The paper, a small thing in the grand scheme of it all, had sparked something deep inside him. He looked up at the janitor one last time, a silent thank you passing between them. With the weight of his thoughts heavy on his mind, Michael knew this was the beginning of something new. His journey back to the top wasn't going to be easy, but it would start with a single step. And that step, as small as it seemed, was now in his hands. After that encounter with the janitor, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted inside him. The small piece of paper, the one he had so casually dismissed moments before, had unlocked a door he didn't even know was there. His world had been upended by his fall from grace, but for the first time in days, he felt a glimmer of hope. He looked at the paper again. It wasn't just a piece of discarded paperwork, it was an opportunity, one he hadn't seen before, buried beneath his panic and frustration. He was no longer the man with billions of dollars, but he was still a man capable of making decisions. The thought sparked something in him. He wasn't done yet. The next day, Michael found himself sitting in his old office again, the building now eerily quiet without the buzz of employees and the hum of constant phone calls. He had requested a meeting with his lawyer and financial advisor, hoping to make sense of the mess his life had become. As he sat there, The weight of his situation settled on him once again. The phone on his desk, once his most prized possession, now felt like a symbol of his failure. His financial advisor, Jim, walked in with a file of documents in hand, and the two exchanged awkward greetings. Michael didn't have the energy to pretend everything was fine anymore. "I don't know where to begin, Jim," Michael said, his voice strained. "Everything's falling apart." Jim sat down across from him, folding his arms. "Michael, you've been through worse. You're a fighter. This is just another setback." Michael shook his head, feeling the sting of his former arrogance. "I thought I had it all figured out. Now, I'm back at square one. But this," Michael waved the paper in front of him, "this could be the start of something new. I just need to know if it's worth pursuing." Jim looked at the paper, then at Michael, his eyes narrowing with interest. "What exactly is this, Michael?" Michael paused before answering. "It's an investment opportunity. One I overlooked in the chaos. A chance to get back into the game, but not the same way as before." He leaned back in his chair, looking out the window as the city buzzed below. It felt like another lifetime ago when he had been on top of the world. Now, all that was left was this small chance, this shred of hope. "I need your help, Jim. Help me figure this out. I don't want to be the man I was before. I want to be better." Over the next few weeks, Michael poured himself into the new opportunity, taking small steps to rebuild. The road was slow and filled with setbacks, but with each challenge, he found a new sense of determination. It wasn't just about the money anymore, it was about proving to himself that he could rise again. The more he worked, the more he realized that the life he had been living before hadn't been fulfilling. All the money, the luxury, the power, it had all been a distraction from what really mattered: purpose. And now, he was on the path to finding it. He kept the janitor's words in his mind. "You forgot this one paper." It had been a simple gesture, but it had meant everything. It reminded him that sometimes, the most important things in life are the ones we overlook. The small acts of kindness, the quiet moments of realization. Michael wasn't just building a new empire. He was building a new version of himself, one that was stronger, more grounded, and more connected to what truly mattered. As the weeks turned into months, Michael's life began to change. The investment started to pay off, but more importantly, he started to see the world differently. He took time to reconnect with old friends, reach out to family members he had neglected, and, most importantly, reflect on the lessons he had learned from his fall. And through it all, the janitor's simple act of kindness remained a symbol of the change that had sparked Michael's journey, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, there is always a chance to turn things around. As the months passed, Michael's new venture began to gain momentum. The small investment opportunity that had once seemed so insignificant was now growing into something bigger than he had ever imagined. But with this success came new challenges. Michael had come to realize that rebuilding his wealth wasn't the same as rebuilding his life. There were still days when the weight of his past decisions haunted him, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was still running from something. Despite his success in the business world, he found himself struggling to connect with others on a deeper level. The people who had once surrounded him now seemed like strangers. He didn't know who he could trust or what truly mattered anymore. He had been so consumed with power and wealth that he had forgotten the importance of relationships, of true connection. One afternoon, Michael found himself walking through the streets of the city, lost in thought. The noise of the world around him felt distant, almost as if he were floating above it all. That's when he saw the janitor again, the same man who had handed him the paper months ago. The janitor was sweeping the sidewalk outside an old building, his movements slow but steady. For a moment, Michael just watched him, unsure of what to say. The janitor, noticing him, stopped what he was doing and looked up, his face breaking into a small, knowing smile. "Sir," the janitor said, his voice calm, "you look like you've been through a storm. But storms always pass, don't they?" Michael smiled faintly, surprised by the simplicity of the janitor's words. He had come to appreciate how much truth could be found in the smallest of moments. "You're right," Michael replied, his voice softer than he expected. "I've been running for so long. I didn't realize I was just avoiding the things that matter most." The janitor nodded, his eyes kind but wise. "Sometimes, all we need is a little pause to see things clearly. You've already come so far, but it's not the destination that matters. It's the journey, and the people you meet along the way." Michael paused for a moment, taking in the janitor's words. There was something about this man, this quiet, humble man, who had more wisdom than anyone he had ever known. He realized then that his wealth, his empire, had always been a mask for his insecurities. It had been an escape, a way to avoid the things he feared most: failure, vulnerability, connection. "I've been thinking," Michael said, his voice steady now. "I've spent so much time trying to rebuild what I had, but I never stopped to think about what I lost along the way. I've been so focused on success that I've neglected everything else: family, friends, even myself." The janitor's smile widened. "It's never too late to change, sir. You just have to start with one step." Michael nodded, feeling the weight of his realization settle in. He had been given a second chance, not just at his business, but at life. And now, he had a choice: to keep running or to face the things he had been avoiding for so long. Later that day, Michael made a phone call to his estranged family. He hadn't spoken to them in years, but today felt like the right time. He also reached out to old friends, inviting them for a simple dinner. For the first time in a long while, Michael felt a sense of peace. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that, for the first time in years, he was finally ready to embrace it, fully and without fear. Weeks passed, and Michael began to find a new rhythm in life. His business was thriving once again, but this time it wasn't just about numbers or profits. He had learned to focus on the things that truly mattered: relationships, authenticity, and the sense of purpose that had long eluded him. He stayed in touch with his family, making regular calls and even planning visits. Slowly, the distance he had created between himself and his loved ones began to fade. He also reconnected with old friends, people he had neglected when he was chasing his dreams of wealth and success. They were surprised at first by his change in demeanor, but as they spent more time together, they saw the transformation in him. He wasn't the same man who had once lived for status and power. He was now someone who truly listened, who cared about more than just his own achievements. One evening, as Michael was leaving his office, he was walking down the street when he saw the janitor again. This time, the man wasn't working. Instead, he was sitting on a bench, enjoying the cool breeze of the evening. Michael hesitated for a moment before approaching him, unsure of what to say. But as he got closer, the janitor looked up and gave him a friendly smile. "You're doing well," the janitor said, as if he already knew what Michael had been up to. "I can see it in your eyes." Michael smiled back, feeling a warmth in his chest. "I am. It's been a long road, but I'm finally getting it right." He sat down next to the janitor, a comfortable silence settling between them. "You know," Michael said after a while, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said to me that day, about how storms pass. You were right. I was so focused on weathering the storm that I didn't realize I was missing the clear skies on the other side." The janitor nodded slowly, looking out at the city as the sun set. "It's easy to get caught up in the storm, but it's what you do afterward that matters. Sometimes, it's about taking a step back and realizing that you don't need everything you thought you did to be happy." Michael reflected on those words. The truth of them resonated deeply. He didn't need the endless pursuit of wealth or validation from others. What he needed was to be present, to appreciate the moments that truly mattered. In a way, the janitor had been his guide, helping him find his way back to what was important in life. Over the next few months, Michael continued to build his business, but he did so with a new sense of balance. He dedicated time to his personal life, making sure he was there for the people who mattered. He didn't neglect the hard work that had gotten him back on his feet, but he no longer allowed that work to define him. One evening, he invited the janitor to dinner at a local restaurant. He wanted to thank him for everything, for being the person who had unknowingly helped him find his way. The janitor was surprised but accepted the invitation, and the two of them spent the evening talking about life, dreams, and the strange paths that sometimes lead to the right place. As they sat together, Michael realized that this was what he had been searching for all along: meaningful connections, moments of peace, and a life that wasn't defined by wealth or status, but by the simple joys of being present in the world. He didn't need to be the billionaire he once was. He had found something much more valuable: true happiness, and the knowledge that storms don't last forever. Months passed, and Michael's transformation was undeniable. He had rebuilt his business, but more importantly, he had rebuilt himself. The days of chasing after fleeting goals were behind him. He had learned that success was not just about the money or the title. It was about the connections he made and the peace he found within himself. He spent more time with his family and friends, repairing relationships that had once been neglected. He took weekend trips, visited local charities, and even found time to volunteer at community events. Michael had found his new purpose. It wasn't the corporate empire he once built, but something far more fulfilling, the opportunity to give back and make a positive impact on the lives of others. One evening, as Michael sat in his office, going over some new projects, he received a call from the janitor. It had been a while since they last spoke, but the janitor had become a quiet mentor of sorts in his life. Michael picked up the phone with a smile, surprised that the janitor was calling him. "Hello, Michael," the janitor said, his voice steady as always. "I heard about the success of your new venture. I'm proud of you, son." Michael felt a warmth spread through him at the words. It had been a long journey to get to this point, and the recognition, however small, meant more than he could express. "Thank you," Michael replied, his voice sincere. "It's been a challenging journey, but I've learned so much along the way. I don't think I would have made it this far without your guidance." The janitor chuckled softly. "I just gave you a little nudge, Michael. You've done the hard work yourself. But I wanted to ask you something. Are you still focused on making a difference? On helping others?" Michael paused, a bit taken aback by the question. "Of course. It's all I've been focused on lately. I've been doing everything I can to give back, to support local communities, and be there for the people who need help the most." "Why do you ask?" "I've been thinking," the janitor continued, "that it's time for you to take the next step. You've gained success, but it's time to use that success to help others in a more direct way. Maybe it's time to use your position to give people opportunities they wouldn't otherwise have. You've got the resources, Michael. Now it's time to make a bigger difference." Michael's mind raced as the janitor's words sank in. He had already done so much, but there was more he could do. He had the power, the experience, and the network to bring real change. He could provide jobs, mentor young entrepreneurs, and create opportunities for people who were struggling. That night, Michael stayed up late, drafting a new initiative. He would use his resources to create a foundation, one focused on empowering people from all walks of life. It would provide mentorship, funding, and guidance for those with dreams, but lacking the resources to achieve them. He envisioned a world where success was not determined by one's background or financial status, but by the opportunities they were given. The next day, he called the janitor. "I've been thinking about what you said," Michael said, his voice full of excitement. "I want to start a foundation. I want to help others build the life they deserve, just like I had the chance to do. I'm ready to take that next step." The janitor's voice was filled with pride. "I knew you had it in you, Michael. I'm glad to see you're ready to make that difference. You'll do great things, I have no doubt." And with that, Michael began the next chapter of his journey, not just as a businessman, but as a leader, mentor, and advocate for those who needed it most. His journey had come full circle, and now, he was ready to help others find their own way, just as he had once been helped in his darkest hour. As Michael's foundation began to take shape, he couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. It was only a few months ago that he had been on the edge of despair, struggling to keep his life together after losing everything he had worked so hard to build. Now, he was in a position to give back, to offer others a chance at the success he had found again. The foundation had already begun providing mentorship, financial support, and resources to young entrepreneurs who had big dreams but limited means. But there was still so much more to do. Michael realized that the work ahead would never truly be finished, but that was part of the beauty of it. Each day brought new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference. One afternoon, as Michael was preparing for a meeting with potential donors, his phone buzzed. It was a message from his old friend, Jim, the financial advisor who had been with him since his early days as a CEO. "Michael, I've been hearing a lot of good things about your foundation, but I have a question for you. Are you truly ready for what's coming next?" The message was simple, but Michael could sense the deeper meaning behind it. He knew Jim well enough to understand that this wasn't just about the foundation's growth. It was about the personal journey he had been on. Michael typed a quick response. "I'm ready, but I still don't know exactly what that means." He paused, thinking about the uncertainty that still lingered. The path he was on felt right, but there were moments when he still doubted himself. Could he really change lives? Could he use his influence for good, or was he still just running away from his past? That night, Michael sat in his office, reflecting on everything he had built so far. His mind wandered back to that one simple moment, the encounter with the janitor. It had changed everything. Without that small piece of paper, he would never have found the courage to begin again. He thought about the conversations he had had with his family, his friends, and the people he was helping through the foundation. The support he had received was overwhelming, and for the first time in his life, he felt like he was truly part of something bigger than himself. A knock on the door pulled him out of his thoughts. It was his assistant, Sarah, holding a stack of papers. "Michael, you've got the meeting with the donors in 20 minutes, she said, handing him the papers. Michael smiled and stood up, straightening his suit. As he walked to the conference room, he felt a sense of calm settle over him. He knew that he wasn't the same person he had been before. He had found a new purpose, one that didn't rely on his wealth or status. This was about something deeper. It was about giving others the opportunities he had once been given. As he sat down with the donors, Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of pride, not because of the deals he was making, but because of the lives he was about to change. The foundation was no longer just his project. It had become a community, a movement that would continue long after he was gone. And for the first time in a long time, Michael felt at peace with where he was. He had found something more valuable than any fortune, a sense of belonging, purpose, and the knowledge that he had the power to change the world. His journey was far from over, but for the first time, he knew exactly where it was headed. Months passed, and the foundation continued to grow, but with growth came new challenges. Michael had learned a great deal, not only about the work itself, but about himself. As the foundation expanded, he realized that the road to true change wasn't as simple as writing a check or providing resources. It was about connecting with people on a deeper level, understanding their struggles, and giving them the tools to help themselves. It was about creating long-term relationships, not just one-time donations. He had learned this the hard way. For all the good he had done, there was still a feeling of emptiness within him. The more he helped others, the more he realized that he had been avoiding facing the truth about his own life. One evening, as Michael sat alone in his office, reviewing reports from the foundation, he received an unexpected visitor. It was Jim, his financial advisor. Michael hadn't heard from Jim in weeks, and the sight of him brought a sense of nostalgia. Jim had been a constant in his life, someone who had helped him navigate through his earlier years of success and failure. But tonight, there was something different about him. Jim walked into the office with a serious expression, sitting down across from Michael. "I've been thinking, Michael," Jim started, "and I think it's time we have a real conversation." Michael raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "You've done amazing things with the foundation," Jim said, "but I can't help but wonder if you're running from something. I know how much you've changed, but there's still a part of you that's hiding." Michael felt a pang in his chest. It was as if Jim had read his mind. For months, he had been pouring his heart and soul into helping others, but he had neglected his own emotional health. The old wounds from his past were still there, buried beneath his success. He had been so focused on proving himself to the world, on making up for his past mistakes, that he hadn't taken the time to heal. "What are you saying?" Michael asked quietly. "I'm saying that it's time to face your past, Michael," Jim said softly. "You can't keep running from it. You can't just fix everyone else's problems and ignore your own. You've come so far, but the last step, the most important one, is accepting yourself, your flaws, your mistakes, everything." Michael sat back in his chair, absorbing Jim's words. It was hard to hear, but deep down, he knew it was true. He had spent so much time focused on helping others, on building his empire, that he had never truly allowed himself to heal. He had never forgiven himself for the decisions that had led him to the bottom in the first place. That night, as Michael lay in bed, he thought about what Jim had said. It was time for him to take the final step in his journey, not just for the people he was helping, but for himself. He had built a new life, a new purpose, but he couldn't keep running from his past. He needed to confront the mistakes, the regrets, and the pain that he had buried. Only then would he be truly free. The next morning, Michael made a decision. He would begin the process of confronting his past, no matter how painful it might be. He would start by reaching out to the people he had hurt, to the family members he had distanced himself from, and he would take responsibility for the mistakes he had made. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight, but it was a necessary step if he was ever going to be at peace with himself. Michael knew that his journey wasn't over yet. It was just entering a new phase, a phase where true healing could begin. As Michael began to reach out to the people from his past, he felt a weight on his chest that he hadn't expected. He had been so consumed with his mission to rebuild his life, his business, and his foundation that he hadn't given much thought to the people he had hurt along the way. He started with his family, the ones he had distanced himself from during his climb to the top. It had been years since he had spoken to his parents, and even longer since he had been in touch with his sister. But the conversation had to happen, and Michael knew it had to come from a place of honesty and vulnerability. He picked up the phone, his hands slightly trembling as he dialed his mother's number. When she picked up, Michael's heart skipped a beat. "Mom," he said softly. "It's me, Michael." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then he heard her voice crack. "Michael, is it really you?" The conversation that followed was long and emotional. Michael apologized for the years of silence, for the times he had chosen success over family, for not being there when they needed him most. His mother listened, her voice gentle but full of emotion. "I've missed you, Michael," she said. "But I understand. You were always trying to make something of yourself." The call ended with tentative promises to rebuild their relationship, but Michael knew this was just the beginning. He needed to show his family that he was committed to being present, to making up for the years lost. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. Next, Michael reached out to his sister, Sarah. It had been years since they had spoken, and their relationship had always been strained. But he knew it was time to face her, to apologize for the way he had neglected her over the years. When he called, he could hear the hesitation in her voice, but she agreed to meet him. The meeting took place at a small cafe, where Michael arrived early, his heart pounding in his chest. When Sarah walked in, he was struck by how much she had changed. The years of distance had created a gap between them, but as soon as she sat down, Michael could see the old bond they shared. "I've been thinking a lot about us," Michael began, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I've been a terrible brother, and I'm sorry for that. I've been so caught up in my own life, I never stopped to think about how my actions affected you." Sarah looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "You've always been focused on your career, Michael. I get it. But you pushed me away when I needed you most." There was no anger in her voice, only a sadness that Michael hadn't recognized until now. "I've made so many mistakes," Michael admitted, "and I can't change the past. But I want to be a better brother, a better person. I want to be here for you." Sarah nodded, a small smile forming on her face. "I think we can start fresh," she said, and Michael felt a sense of relief flood over him. It wasn't going to be perfect, but it was a start. As the days passed, Michael made the effort to reconnect with more people from his past. He called old friends, reached out to former colleagues, and tried to mend relationships that he had let slip away in pursuit of his career. Each conversation brought a sense of healing, a realization that it wasn't just about business or success. It was about the connections we make, the people we love, and the bonds we form. One evening, Michael sat on his balcony, looking out at the city lights. He felt at peace for the first time in a long while. The foundation was thriving, his family was starting to heal, and he had begun to understand that true success wasn't about wealth or status. It was about love, connection, and personal growth. His journey wasn't over, but he had finally found his way back to what truly mattered. As Michael stood in front of the foundation's new community center, looking out over the crowd, he felt a sense of pride that he had never experienced before. This was more than just a milestone in his career. It was the culmination of everything he had worked for, not just in business, but in life. The center was a place where people who had been overlooked, dismissed, or rejected could come to find support, guidance, and a chance to rebuild their lives. It was a tangible representation of his journey, how far he had come, not just as a businessman, but as a man who had learned to truly value the people around him. The grand opening was a success, with community leaders, donors, and former clients of the foundation all coming together to celebrate. Michael had made sure to invite his family and closest friends. His mother, who had been hesitant at first, now stood by his side, beaming with pride. His sister Sarah, whom he had once been so distant from, was there too, chatting with old friends, a smile on her face. It was a sight Michael had never thought he would see again. It was proof that the broken relationships of the past could be healed, one step at a time. As the evening drew to a close, Michael found himself standing alone outside, looking at the stars above. The city was alive with lights and sounds, but he felt a peaceful calm within himself. He had found a sense of balance in his life, something he hadn't even known he was missing all those years. For so long, he had been defined by his wealth, his success, and his status. But now, he realized that none of that mattered without the connections he had, built with the people who truly cared about him. It was the relationships, the bonds with family, friends, and even strangers that had brought him the most fulfillment. The sound of footsteps behind him pulled him out of his thoughts. It was Jim, his old financial advisor. Jim had become more than just a colleague over the years. He had become a friend, someone who had been there for him even when things seemed bleak. Michael smiled as Jim joined him on the balcony. "You've done it, Michael," Jim said, his voice filled with admiration. "You've built something that will outlast any fortune. This is what true success looks like." Michael nodded, his eyes still on the city below. "I've learned that success isn't measured by what we accumulate, but by what we give back," he said quietly. "It's about making a real impact, not just in business, but in people's lives." Jim clapped him on the back. "You've done just that. And I know this is just the beginning for you." As Michael turned to face Jim, he realized how far he had come. The journey hadn't been easy, and there were still challenges ahead, but he was no longer afraid of them. He had found his true purpose, and nothing could take that away. He didn't need to be a billionaire to be happy. He didn't need to impress anyone or prove anything. All he needed was to continue living with integrity, kindness, and the understanding that the best way to live was to help others rise alongside him. As the last of the guests left, Michael stood there for a moment longer, taking in the peaceful night. He thought about the janitor, the man who had unknowingly set him on this path with just one small act of kindness. He would never forget that moment, for it had changed his life in ways he couldn't have imagined. And now, as he looked ahead, he knew that the best was yet to come. The foundation was just the beginning, and Michael was ready for whatever came next. He had learned that life was not just about success or failure, but about the journey and the people who walk beside you along the way. In this inspiring story, we follow a man who loses everything in the blink of an eye, but finds a new sense of purpose through kindness, redemption, and the power of giving back. This is a remarkable journey of transformation, and it is one of the most touching millionaire stories you'll ever hear. After losing his fortune, the protagonist begins rebuilding his life from scratch, learning valuable lessons along the way. Through a series of heartfelt encounters, including a simple but life-changing interaction with a janitor, he discovers that true wealth is not measured in money but in the connections and relationships we build. As he regains his footing in the business world, he realizes that the best success comes not from accumulating more, but from helping others rise. This story is not just about a millionaire who loses everything and starts over. It's about the heartwarming millionaire stories that show how personal growth and giving back can make all the difference. The story highlights how kindness and humility can lead to real success and fulfillment, making it one of the most inspiring millionaire stories you'll ever listen to. With each chapter, we see how a man's life can be transformed not only by his actions, but by the people he meets along the way. This is a powerful reminder that anyone, even someone who has lost everything, can make a fresh start and create a lasting impact. These millionaire stories are a testament to the strength of the human spirit, and they will leave you inspired to make a difference in your own life.